The first point of education that we will review is freedom of movement and contact on screens. The highlighted offensive player, Bam Adebayo, does not give his opponent, Denny Avdia, an opportunity to avoid the contact, and an illegal screen was correctly called by the trail official. To be considered legal, the screener must get directly into his opponent's path and give him the opportunity to avoid contact. Next, we will see another example of an illegal screen set against a moving opponent. The highlighted offensive player, Mark Williams, moves into position to set a screen, but he then extends his backside into the path of the trailing defender, Josh Green, and Williams does not give him an opportunity to avoid the contact. An offensive foul for an illegal screen was correctly called. The final example in this section will again show a screener committing an offensive foul. The highlighted offensive player, Drew Eubanks, moves to set a screen, but he then quickly rolls toward the basket, making illegal contact with his opponent, Jonathan Kuminga, without giving Kuminga the opportunity to avoid the contact. This is an offensive foul for an illegal screen. Now, let's look at some examples of defensive players affecting offensive players' freedom of movement on the perimeter. The highlighted defensive player, Jaylen Brown, grabs his opponent, Rudy Gobert, around the midsection, clearly affecting Gobert's freedom of movement as he attempts to roll to the basket. This is illegal contact by Brown, and the defensive foul was correctly called. Watch the contact between the dribbler and his defender on this next play. The on-ball defender, OG Anunoby, initiates illegal contact with the dribbler, Giannis Antetokounmpo, that affects Antetokounmpo's rhythm and balance as he starts to drive toward the basket. This is a defensive foul on Anunoby. On-ball defenders cannot affect an opponent's speed, quickness, balance, or rhythm. As we know, the freedom of movement guidelines extend from the perimeter into the post area. Here, the highlighted defensive player, James Wiseman, wraps his right arm around the midsection of the offensive player, Robert Williams III, as Williams looks to receive the entry pass. This illegal wrap by Wiseman, seen clearly on the low-angle replay, was correctly ruled a defensive foul by the slot official. Watch the highlighted defensive player, Jaden Ivey, on this next play. Ivey will wrap his arm around the waist of the offensive player, Chet Holmgren, as Holmgren looks to receive the entry pass from his teammate. Ivey clearly affects Holmgren's ability to move freely, and a defensive foul on Ivey was needed on this play. The next point of education to review is traveling, and this first play will show an example of a traveling violation on the perimeter. The offensive player, Trendon Watford, establishes his left foot as his pivot foot, but he then lifts that left foot prior to releasing the ball on the dribble. A traveling violation was correctly called on this play. Our next example in the traveling section shows a violation that occurs after the offensive player has gathered the ball. The offensive player, Tobias Harris, drives toward the basket, but after he gathers the ball, he takes more than the allowed 2 steps before releasing the ball on the field goal attempt. The replay clearly shows Harris gathering the ball with his left foot on the floor. He then steps with his right, then his left, and finally with his right foot again for an illegal third step. A traveling violation was needed on this play. Our final example in this section shows a traveling violation that occurs in the post. The offensive player, Toumani Camara, gathers the ball with his left foot on the floor, but he then moves and slides that left foot prior to releasing the ball. This is a traveling violation, and it was correctly called here. Non-basketball moves remain a point of education, and the first type to review is an offensive player abnormally extending part of his body into a defender. The highlighted offensive player, Jalen Green, takes a jump shot, and he then extends his right leg out in an overt manner, initiating illegal contact with the defender, Jalen Suggs, tripping him and sending him to the floor. As this is clearly more than marginal contact initiated by Green, this was correctly ruled an offensive foul. Keep your eye on the highlighted offensive player, Jeremy Grant, on this next play. As Grant attempts a 3-point field goal, He extends his right leg out in an overt manner, initiating illegal contact with the defender, Marcus Smart. This is illegal contact as Smart trips and falls to the floor. An offensive foul on Grant was needed on this play. The next type of non-basketball move to review is a dribbler abruptly veering off his path and moving sideways or backwards into a defender. The highlighted dribbler, Tyler Hero, drives toward the paint, but he moves abruptly to his left, initiating illegal contact with the defensive player, Cam Reddish. This contact by Hero is more than marginal, as it clearly affects Reddish's ability to defend the play. This was correctly ruled an offensive foul by the trail official. Watch the contact on this next play closely. The highlighted dribbler, Luka Doncic, drives toward the paint, and we can see that he does not veer off his path in any way. Instead, it is the trailing defender, Keldon Johnson, who moves into Doncic's path without establishing a legal guarding position, and Johnson makes more than marginal contact with Doncic. As the replays show, the contact on this play was clearly initiated by the defender, and it was correctly ruled a defensive foul. The next type of non-basketball move that we will review is an offensive player launching or leaning into a defender at an abnormal angle or trajectory. The highlighted offensive player, Kyle Kuzma, shot fakes, and he then moves overtly and abruptly forward, and in doing so, he initiates more than marginal contact with the defensive player, P.J. Washington. Since this contact, initiated by Kuzma, is clearly more than marginal, it is correctly ruled an offensive foul. The final play in this section will show contact that results in a defensive foul. After the shot fake by the offensive player, Cade Cunningham, the defensive player, Brook Lopez, moves forward, and he moves into Cunningham's body right as Cunningham starts his upward motion to shoot. We can see that Cunningham made no abnormal or overt movement into the defender, and because the contact on this play is more than marginal, it is a defensive foul on Lopez, and it was correctly called. The next type of non-basketball move to review is when an offensive player uses his off arm to initiate illegal contact with his defender. Here, the dribbler, Karl Anthony Towns, uses his off arm to hook the arm of the defender, Jeremiah Robinson Earl. This illegal contact, seen clearly on the replay, affects Robinson Earl's ability to defend the play. An offensive foul on Towns was correctly ruled on this play by the lead official. Watch the contact on this next play closely. The offensive player, Mikal Bridges, starts his drive to the basket, and he uses his off arm to initiate contact and hook the left arm of the defender, Torrey Craig. And although a defensive foul was called here on Craig, the correct call on this play would be an offensive foul on Bridges for the illegal arm hook.